If you like English muffins, you're gonna love these sourdough English muffins. This recipe is so easy and so simple and actually fairly quick outside of the resting time and the fermentation time, and it's very uncomplicated, which most of my recipes are, because that's how I love those recipes to be. These are just as light and airy and fluffy as regular muffins, and they have the nice sourdough complex taste to it and the health benefits of sourdough. They're also a great way to use up your sourdough starter in the summer when it's too hot to bake sourdough bread. And these are just, you can make them on your stovetop. You don't need to turn on the oven and preheat it at 500 degrees for an hour and heat up your kitchen. So this is a perfect way to make something in the summer, and it's great for sandwiches and for your breakfast. And let me show you how simple this recipe is. I started the dough last night by adding a cup and a quarter of warm water to a large bowl. Next, I'm adding a cup of really ripe sourdough starter. This really helped the recipe because we're not adding any other leavening, baking soda or baking powder or anything like that. I like to mix the sourdough starter with the water to get that activated. And I'm adding some melted butter. The melted butter helps integrate a little bit better than if you used soft butter or cold butter. Add a teaspoon of sea salt. And a tablespoon of honey. Especially if you use raw honey, you'll get the enzymes, and it really helps your sourdough starter get off to a good start. I like to mix all these ingredients up before I add my flour. You can use a Danish dough hook, or you can also use another spoon, or you can do this in your KitchenAid stand mixer. I just find that this recipe is so easy that I don't need that. To that mixture, I add 4 cups of flour. Sometimes you need to check your dough the day that you make it. There's always some variables here with sourdough and the flour you use. So we're really going for a shaggy, sticky dough. So it is supposed to be sticky, but you don't want it to be too wet. And I'm trying to show you what it looks like, and actually I have to add a little bit more flour here because it is still too wet. Obviously, cup measurements are not the most precise. If you used grams, that would be a little bit more precise, but again, then it really depends on the type of flour you use, the hydration of your sourdough starter, and all these other variables. So basically just go for a consistency and make it a thick, very thick, sticky dough. Finally, I like to use my hands to make sure that it's really well incorporated, and you can see how sticky it is. It still sticks to my hands, and that's perfectly fine because also it will hydrate a little bit while we're letting it sit overnight. And then I like to cover it with a beeswax wrap. You can also use plastic wrap. And I'm gonna put it in my refrigerator overnight. I did this the evening before. You can easily let it sit there for 24 hours to make it work for your schedule. When I'm ready to make the sourdough English muffins, I like to take the dough out of the refrigerator and let it sit on the counter for about an hour. Here's my dough. It's still a little bit sticky, but not as much as last night. And here's a dough scraper. Put some flour here on my work surface. I like to flour my rolling pin. And as you can see, I'm leaving the dough as is. I'm not actually kneading it. I'm just rolling it out. And it really depends how thick you want to roll it out. First of all, how many English muffins you want to get out of this dough and how thick you want them to be. Obviously, they will still rise a little bit, but this is pretty much what I do. So this is about 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. And then I have some round cookie cutter or biscuit cutter, and it has a serrated side and a round side. I like the round side a little bit better. However, before we do this, I prepare a baking sheet, and the very distinct look of English muffins is that it has some cornmeal on it. So I'm sprinkling my baking sheet with some cornmeal to prevent the English muffins from sticking. Here, and I just cut these out. So this is what they look like. They have, you can see it, they're a little bit wetter on the inside, a little bit drier on the outside, and you can even turn them over once so they have a little bit of cornmeal on the top side. And then I just try to cut out as many as I can. Now I actually have more than 12. Again, it depends on how thick you roll them out or how thin you roll them out. And then the question is, what do you do with the remaining dough? And I'm going to show you 2 options here. So the first option is to just get rid of it. I don't like that kind of waste. So what I always like to do is create another dough ball and make some more. They won't be quite as pretty, but they're still sourdough muffins and they're still tasty. I need to roll this out a little bit thinner. I get at least another 2 out of this here. A little thicker, and then the last one I'm just gonna make one that just as round, but it's not gonna be super pretty. It's not gonna look exactly the same. We can try to fit this in here and flatten a little bit, but that's gonna be the odd guy out. I can make this a little bit bigger. Cover it with a towel and let this rise in a warm spot. Now, I said in the recipe that you can find in the description box that about 2 hours, but obviously this depends because we're not using any other leavening. If it's in the winter, you might have to let the English muffins rise a little bit longer. And if it's a warm summer day, a hot summer day like we have today, and I'm going to put it outside where it's even warmer than inside the house, this might only take an hour. So basically use your best guess, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to look for when I know they're ready to be cooked, and I'll show you that when we're done letting them rise. So it's been an hour and a half at a really warm temperature, and these muffins have a little bit of a spring to them. They have visibly risen. This one more because it's actually thicker. And over here, I'm preheating my cast iron skillet. I love making these in a cast iron skillet because it holds the heat better and it's very sturdy. And so I'm gonna let that heat up over about a medium heat, and then I want to turn it to low. So we'll do that, and then we're ready to cook these. Before I'm ready to cook the English muffins, I like to heat up the cast iron skillet over medium heat so that it's really hot, and then I like to add just a little bit of oil, and then I'll cook them in batches, but I turn the heat to low. And you might have to experiment a little bit with your skillet and your heat settings on your particular stove. If in doubt, you always want to have it a little bit lower than too high heat setting, because otherwise they will burn and get black. And I like to cook them for about 4 to 5 minutes on each side. I also like to cover them so that the heat stays in the skillet. After about 4 minutes, I flip them with a spatula. Here they are, nice golden brown. Once they're done, I transfer them to a wire rack to let them cool off. If you find that they're not quite done in the middle, they're still a little bit wet, you can always finish them in the oven at 350 degrees for maybe 10 minutes or so. So sometimes there's a little bit of experimentation needed. And once I'm done with the first batch, I'll finish the remaining English muffins until they're all done. Here are your sourdough English muffins, and if you're interested in how I actually came up with the recipe, I did find a nice regular English muffin recipe, and using my simple conversion and cheat sheet, I converted it to sourdough, and these couldn't be more perfect. We love them in the morning with just a little bit of butter and maybe honey or jam, or even as a sandwich, and 2 nights ago I had them with a burger. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in this video.